behind on the schedule because there's so much exciting information being shared today. I am Muchinetta Tnapel, and I am the moderator of this talk today, and we are talking about the future materials, new materials, and everything in between. I would love for you guys to introduce yourself. Let's start with Simon and make our way over to Kuben. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I do it really short. So my name is Simon Angel. I'm the curator of the Sustainable Innovations area, which is positioned right on the back of this area, the white square. Please feel invited that after this conversation and have a small tour or ask questions.
And I'm Kirsi Terho. I'm the key account director at Infinity Fiber Company, which is a technology powerhouse, which is more or less about recycling the post-consumer textile waste back to new fibers in a chemical recycling process.
Yes, hi, my name is Marianne Udman, and I'm here from TrustTrace, and I lead the sustainability and innovation team at TrustTrace. We're a global traceability and transparency SaaS platform provider for retail and fashion brands.
Hi, my name is Kuben. I'm from the UK. We are part of a company called 108, and we provide circular solutions for fashion waste with the goal to reduce landfill waste.
And as you probably noticed, they're all coming from different angles. We've got Simon, who's new materials. We've got Kirsty, who's all about recyclability. And we've got Marianne over there, who's all about traceability. And Kuben at the end is focused a lot on fashion waste. And the reason why I kind of brought them all together to talk about new materials is because they come from different angles. And I always feel like when we have panels, it's very important to provide different voices. So they're able to provide different kind of information for everybody. So let's begin, guys. New materials, we're going to start there. What are your thoughts, Simon? Because I know that's kind of your forte. What are your thoughts on new materials? Do you think that it's something that is only staying in the lab, or is going to get a life of its own and be adopted by bigger brands?
Well, I think it totally depends. It's not about how to push new material in the market. It's all about making smart connections with other parts of the industry. So making connections is all about establishing relationships, is all about getting to know each other, is all about getting to learn about the characteristics of your specific material or your specific way of producing stuff. So it needs this, like, we got to get to know each other kind of approach. And I think this is where the focus must be. It's not about laying in your bed, like what new material can I contribute to the market or what makes sense, but it's about pre-think what you want to contribute in general.
And with new materials, Kirsty, I mean, is this an area that you look into? Because you're recycling the old. You're all about traditional materials, what we can do, bring them back in. Do you ever think about how maybe you can recycle new type of materials like the ones that Simon is showcasing at Sustainable Innovations?
Yeah, we are actually concentrating mainly on cellulose part of the stream. So those cottons and viscose and lyocells. So we are not very much looking into the totally new type of materials. We want to keep ourselves in a certain area where we see the businesses, because really the circularity don't happen if there is not a business. So business is a very important angle to bring into these talks, because when there is a business, then when something starts to happen. And for us, the business is in cellulosics, which we know best. And we are not polyester people. We are not wood people. We are more or less, even though wood is cellulose, wood could be our ingredient. But at the same time, we want to now first start with the old textiles and really make the cotton heavy stream to kind of like circulate over and over again. Because that is just one solution that is needed. There's lots of innovations that is needed to really make the whole textile industry circular.
And you just said you are creating materials that you putting back into circulation. How many lives do these materials actually have at the end of the day?
Yeah, if you think about our solution, we are actually making something called Infina. Infina is a new type of fiber which has a cotton hand. You need to have somewhat of a cotton stream to recycle the Infina again, but it doesn't have a kind of like a times how many times you can do it. It really depends on where the actual the cellulose molecule lives. So that is the key thing, and that needs to be in a certain length. And it's not about the fiber length; it's a molecular length, and you recycle that over and over again. So Infina has a little bit shorter, but if there is a cotton stream with Infina, then you can circulate that because the process is attacking actually through the longest chains first. So that's how we ensure it keeps on circulation.
So you offer the solution of recyclability, and Marianne, you offer the solution of traceability. What role does that play in terms of textiles? How can we use traceability in order to better our business strategies?
Yeah, with any kind of material, you first want to ensure that, let's say, the first life of the product also is produced under the right social and environmental circumstances. And for that, you need to have visibility and transparency of the supply chain. A lot of brands right now do not know the entire supply chain and do not know who's producing their clothes under which circumstances and under what kind of environmental impact. So that's the first way where we need to start. And then when talking about new materials, it's the same for that. I think there's a lot of discussions or a lot of talk about new innovative materials, which is great, but also sometimes I feel that there is not an holistic view of those materials in terms of, let's take sometimes the alternative leather or so. It's not as durable as real leather maybe is. Of course, it has other advantages, but if it breaks much quicker, maybe that outweighs the other part. It's often or sometimes can be used a lot more chemicals in that part as well. So it's really, first of all, understanding how your materials or your products are made and with what they're made when you can make informed decisions. So that would be our first way to start. Start with the traceability, start with the transparency on any kind of material.
Talking about transparency, Simon, the innovators that you know of, do they take into account the transparency of their product when they're creating this new fabric?
So what I learned, yes, they do. But what I found interesting in this conversation is about, now I realize that since traceability might be a topic, it makes me think, well, how can we skip the need of traceability? That might be a good thought as well. Huh? So I'm thinking now, like, for example, working with a product or material like human hair, we can collect it without the need of tracing it, and we can use it, made it out of yarn in our own home, and we can work with it. So there is no need in getting the traceability of this material as well.
Yeah.
So that
maybe if I can just jump in there, because I do think that even with human hair, you would have someone supplying the hair, you would have someone that then takes the hair and does something with it, whatever that is, and then so you do have, even if it's maybe a shorter supply chain, but you would have a supply chain there as well.
but this is a conversation, not a
Go
discussion.
for it, yes.
But this is interesting because if I look at this, let's think about the word globalization. Eh? So I live in a really small village. We have a hairdresser which collects hair. So, and we have a lot of craftspeople and we have a lot of people who love to work with this material. So we have this small community and we already can talk in the afternoon, well, hey, I used your hair. So this is a really small chain where we can collect material, where we can work with it. So that might be a possibility and a way of working itself. This is what I realize and what I like about pre-thinking what we are actually doing with material and with the chain itself.
But I think that would only work you can't scale it. If you live in London, you know, I mean, I wouldn't trust anybody's hair from London. But, you know, it's different. But I think if you're thinking in terms of like living in a village and kind of having this community, it makes a lot of sense. But I think traceability is super important because the industry is not honest. I mean, I don't know.
So I totally agree. So I'm not against traceability. I'm pro traceability. But what I try to stimulate is the logic or the sense about what we are doing or what are we creating and what are we, contributing to the chain or the products or the market.
Talking about the market, Kuben, you are all about fashion waste. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that new materials are the way forward, or do you think we need to deal with the fashion waste that we have currently?
Yeah, I'm focused on old, so past and current waste. And in the UK, we're having a huge problem with fast fashion as a whole. Production is on the ultimate high. Consumption is next level. I mean, where do we begin? The problem is diabolical, and we're sitting with a lot of waste that's ending up in landfills. I mean, there is a rainbow. There's so many opportunities with regards to fashion waste. The whole circularity process is quite holistic, if you look at it, in my opinion. So the panel prior to our panel, it was all about textiles and circularity. Because if you think about it, we live in a linear economy, which is take, make, and dispose. If you look at circularity, it's take, make, reuse. And that model needs to resonate in every sphere of our lives. But when we produce with the end result of not having that in mind, we end up in this continuous loop of take, make, dispose. So we need to change society globally. Deloitte's gap report, as of today, they made mention of these statistics showing that we are, as of today, 7.2% circular. In 2020, we were in 2018, we were at 8.6%, and 2020, it's just scaling down to where we are right now, which is 7.2, which is not good from a circular point.
So are you basically saying that new materials need to take a back seat because we need to deal with our traditional materials first?
Because of, yeah.
Simon, you want to add something?
I have a question about circularity. If I hear correctly, then the circles start by take. Is that the first word that you are?
Yeah, take, make.
I'm very concentrated and focused on the word like take. Is it so that we take stuff, or is it so that we borrow stuff from nature or something? So I like the idea that I don't like the word about taking it, because it feels like, who are we as a human and society about taking stuff and then use it into this cycle and bring it back? I think it's about, maybe with a little respect, about borrowing stuff or something. But this is a linguistic thing. It's not.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting about take it or borrow it.
Well, it's production, consumption. That's taking.
I think as well with take, are you kind of saying that the respect for our clothes is means that maybe we just take it's because we have no respect for it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's the whole fast fashion concept. That's take.
Kirsty, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that the textile industry it's not about that. It's actually three things that needs to happen that the circularity really comes together. First is, of course, the reuse of the garments. Of course, one thing before that is the overconsumption that we need to handle. Mm-hmm. But then there is a reuse. Then there is a repair. And in the end, what comes is recycling.
Yeah.
And recycling should have different innovations that will deal with that problem. And if those three doesn't happen, there wouldn't be an ecosystem that is going to be fully circular. And that is what makes the circular economy in textiles happen.
Yeah.
I would like to add one more part to it, because I think the ultimate problem is the consumption patterns that we currently have of garments being so, or textiles being so cheap that you can just throw it away, and that's the ultimate problem that we're facing right now, why we have all this waste in the textile industry. And again, I know I'm bashing on about traceability, but that's the point, the angle I'm bringing in here. But it's all about you, if you really do pay attention to the social and environmental aspects along your value, you can't sell a T-shirt for 99 cents. It's just impossible. It's inhumane. It's impossible. But so that needs to be reflected in the prices, and only with that, eventually, the waste will reduce itself as well. Because everything that we're doing now, circularity, which I'm absolutely for circularity, but it's preventing, or it's working with a problem that we have created. So we need to also reduce the waste in the first time, and then also, of course, to have garments or textiles, give them a longer life.
I totally agree on that, but we are looking at this from the very European angle. If you are someone that lives, for example, in those less fortunate countries,
Yeah.
for them to raising up the prices, what they're going to wear? That's a question I always ask, because we are looking at this from very Western perspective. There's a lot happening in this world, and textiles are everywhere. It's not only in Europe. So if we start thinking about really how to handle the waste and how traceability can help in that, I think that traceability in garments can help the way that we know what we can recycle in the end.
Yes.
And that would be probably the solution.
I think that's a really strong point, Kirsty. And talking about a global view, would you say that new materials have a global view, or do you think a lot of the new materials is focused more in Europe and America?
What do you mean with that question?
I mean, like, for example, if you are creating an innovation here, let's say in Germany, is it the kind of innovation that can be also replicated in Africa, in Asia?
Sure.
Or is it only focused in the West? Are we only focusing our problems, what happens in the West, rather than what also happens around the world?
Good question. Well, what I find interesting is that what we recently discovered is that all over the world, humans have hair. So I think it's a global thing. All over the world, there is paper. And there's a beautiful project from Camilla Champion, who is making garment out of paper, for example. So I'm not making fun about this concept or this holistic or this global approach, but I think if we look really closely about what we have in our circle and what we are having and what we can share and what we can use it for, then we start to tickle our brains a bit and rethink, or maybe then at the end when you are a designer, you can pre-think about what do you want to contribute. It might be a material, it might be a product, it might be a concept, but maybe it's good not designing a process, but talk about it, or make a fairy tale out of it and make a podcast or something.
So you're basically saying people need to refer to what's around them in order to create. That's a good way of kind of like looking into the future. Like, why don't we look at the materials around us and what we can make into materials?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so what I learned, so I'm there and I have the luxury to, in the eye of my corner, follow the presentations here. And I think the red thread about this is how to reconnect about what we are doing and what we're needing. So
Going back to basics.
Yeah.
And what do you guys think? Do you think going back to basics is a solution when it comes to materials?
Yes and no. Of course, there's some room for that also. But in a large scale, if you think about consumption and kind of like a growing population in the world, we need these new types of ways of producing the garments. And those needs to be the ones that are scalable, fundable, business. And that's when things start to happen.
Without being an expert on materials, I feel that the more natural the materials are and the less additives and the less processes and the less artificial parts you need to include, the better the material, because then you have if you're looking at the life cycle of a product or of a material, also the degradability, the biodegradability, all of that is much, much easier. And we created ourselves a big problem with all the artificial materials and all the polyester and everything. So I think I would look at it, the more natural the fibers can be, probably the better for us, for the environment, and for the products.
Just a question to the audience. If we were to produce natural material products, how many of you would pay triple the price for a T-shirt that you normally would pay £9 for, but you pay 30? Come on. Because I honestly think that consumers think with their wallet. And a lot of the problems that happen is that we have all these good intentions, we bring great products to market, but if the price is expensive, then people can admire them for the innovation, but never actually afford the product.
Why do you use the word expensive?
Because a lot of products that I've come across that are sustainable are always a little more pricier than an average top.
But maybe the word expensive is that it's not worth it. So I think you should think about pricing it about what it's worth. So it is, if it's worth like for 20 years, for example, then it's not expensive. It's simply you have to pay a bit more in front. So the word expensive is a negative word.
Yeah, but also,
And so it is. So we have to learn about. So we are all programmed with this paradigm shifts about. That's the case.
I think the reason why maybe some materials are cheap at the moment, like polyester, is because you don't take the rest into account. You don't take the pollution into account. That should all be, in theory, counted into the cost of polyester. And then you wouldn't have cheap clothes, because if you're responsible also for the end of life, the microplastic, whatever, all the problems with polyester, then the prices would increase, and you wouldn't have the comparability between the natural fibers and the cheap polyester that much.
Talking about price increase, Kuben, you once talked about fashion tax being the solution to fast fashion. That if people are
100%.
taxed, the chances are they won't, they won't likely produce more fast fashion.
Well, I think they will think along the lines of made to be remade, built to last, made to be reused. That should be the ethos. Currently, the fibers are synthetic fibers, and it doesn't have a good circular ethos behind it. So
I think you were saying that if it works for the cigarette and the sugar
fashion tax is the way
industries,
forward. Well,
I feel the allegory.
it will make people think about if fast fashion is at a higher price, then maybe the people producing will think about producing along the lines of better fabrics, human rights, a proper ecosystem, which is not in place at the moment.
Simon, you wanted to add something?
Sorry, I'm just sitting here and getting more excited by the minute, because if I hear like tax in combination with fast fashion, it brings up. It brings up the allegory. I was thinking about the Catholic Church, that if you did something wrong, then simply donate, and then you get away with it. So I think here we have to pre-think about what we are doing here. Are we like inventing systems to fix about what is wrong or not correct, or are we going to do this long-term investments in educating or forming or like inspire people to actually connect with what we are doing? And with
So you're saying the big companies will not be deterred by tax. They'll be like, we'll pay it and then
I don't
move
know.
on.
I don't. This is the big companies or small companies. I think people will. I think if this would be the case, that we are choosing for this fast fashion tax, a lot of people will pay the tax simply, and the prices will. We will find a way to put it under the carpet anyway. So this is our animalistic behavior. We will find a way to get rid of all of our sins. But I think we have to connect and rethink what we need and what we want and what kind of purpose is connected to that.
Simon, do you believe that right now there's a lot of legislation coming up, not exactly taxes, but other legislations really pushing a lot of companies to take responsibilities? Do you feel that this is not going to make a difference?
I don't know. I'm just bringing up this. So there is beautiful sides of human behavior, and there are also like really dark sides of human behavior.
Sure.
And I don't think that it will never change. So we will never be in a world that we are evaluating in people with only the sunny side of life. We will always have to face the negative elements of our own behavior. And so I think there is always a need in circularity. There's always a need in traceability. There's always a need in recycling stuff. But I think, let's educate people, or let's create more awareness, or I made my point.
But do you know what I think it is as well? Awareness and education can only go so far. I'm sure most of you in the industry have been educating and raising awareness for what feels like a decade, but yet still no actions being made. So legislation, you brought it up, Marianne. It's something that everyone's talking about. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the way forward?
Yeah, definitely. We see it from a traceability perspective. Just 5 years ago or 4 years ago when we started off, brands were coming to us and saying, yeah, we need to do traceability. Yeah, why do you want to do traceability? Well, yeah, we need to know why. They didn't really know. And now it's completely mind shift. Now brands are coming to us and it's like, okay, we need traceability. We need to know our supply chain. We need to know all the data that's coming in. And that's only due to regulations. And they're quoting the exact regulations. And I do believe that this is going to have an impact, because you need to, once you have the visibility, you can't just put you can't just close your eyes to it, and you have to have a change to what you find in the data, because once also you have the data, it would be wrong to just hide it from public communication. So I do believe that there is a huge mind shift due to regulations. Absolutely.
And what about you, Kirsty? I'm sure a lot of companies have come running in your direction for help with some of the legislations that are coming forward. Have you seen a boom in business?
Yeah, now, of course. I mean, we have a very big demand at the moment, and we can't really serve everybody. So we need to be scaling fast. But if you think about the legislations and when they are coming, the ecosystems will be ready for that. So there needs to be a certain time that the whole transfer happens. And EU, for example, needs to put their money where their mouth is. So nothing happens if there's no money. So, for example, if you think about scaling the innovations, that's what they need to support in terms of making those legislations happen. If there is no built-up ecosystem, it's useless if you can't do it. So I think that it needs to be built together. Now the legislators are kind of like putting certain stamps on something, but not really thinking, is the industry ready for it? And that needs to be evaluated a little bit more.
I think everyone can agree the industry is not ready for it. Would you say the industry is ready for it?
No, they're absolutely not.
I think they're going to take
they need to start getting ready, and
Yeah.
we definitely see a change in the industry, and we definitely see that brands are moving, retailers are moving, and something is happening. And most of the legislations are not happening immediately, but they're getting prepared.
Simon, are the new textile, I feel like saying crew, but those who are kind of creating new types of tighter fabrics, are they ready for legislation? Because they're going to be affected at some point as well.
I think it's a very complex question. But so I don't know if I bring up an answer now, so I apologize in advance. But what I notice is that if you think about the difference between thinking small and thinking big industry and smaller designers, then there's a huge gap. So the industry has its context and its way of thinking, and they also have some legit arguments in working the way they are working. And the designer with new material and with new working methods has its own characteristics as well. So what I'm trying to improve is that when you think of new stuff, you have to make contact with the bigger audience and the bigger world itself. And therefore, you need to focus on your product, but you also need to focus on what do I need to relate to the bigger picture. So you need to learn the language, you need to learn the processes, you have to get some know-how, and vice versa. This is the only way I try to stimulate how to bridge that gap. And I really don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. No, because I think honestly, looking at the legislations that are coming forward, I think new materials and smaller companies, I think small companies are going to fall through the cracks because it's going to be really hard for them to adapt and adopt. And new materials, I mean, what laws can you give them when you don't understand how it's even made? You know, so I think a lot of them, they might also fall through the crack. I think that the lawmakers are going after the big boys. You know, they are going after the bigger companies that they can be held accountable. And I'm very interested with you, Kuben, in terms of fashion waste. What do you hope will happen in the next couple of years in terms of legalities in dealing with our fashion waste?
Well, the UK is, well, the whole Brexit situation really affects us. I wish we were still part of the EU because there's no change. I mean, do I have to register and move to Amsterdam because I know doors will open, but I can't. So what do? We're stuck with millions of tons of fashion waste. The only way forward is circularity. Resale sites, Trust Trace helping to sort out what fabrics can be utilized, what's not. We don't have any digital media or digital IDs on fast fashion items. It's difficult to assist with sorting process. We're not there yet.
You said that rubbish, like all the clothes that people throw away, they need to remain in the UK.
They need to be in the UK. We need to provide circular solutions for our fashion waste because it is profitable. Sustainability is profitable, but it's a mindset change. People need to think outside the whole fast fashion industry, and we need to close the loop. We need to have ecosystems in place to assist new brands, new businesses. We need more of this in the UK, many more of this. We don't have enough.
And to the audience, I want to ask you a question. Are you big believers that all our clothes and what we don't use should remain in the country? You know, for example, all our waste stays in Germany and doesn't go to Africa or Asia?
Shall I? There.
Yeah.
I could imagine that maybe that would help actually if it stays in the country and people would really realize how much waste, how much fast fashion is remaining and being actually shipped in other country and being shipped under sort of like, how to say it in English or in German, under the carpet. So what people don't see, I don't need to do anything because it's not directly affecting me.
Yeah.
But if they would see how many tons it is, and if they start to compare it on landfill and tons, so people would be aware that only this little country of Germany has so much waste, or Switzerland or Denmark. If that would help to educate the consumer to see, it's like clean up your own shit. Excuse my wording.
And what would you like to say? Oh, she already has a mic.
Hello. Yeah. So I don't believe all the wastage will stay in Europe because maybe all of you come from Europe. You are grow up in a very good condition here, and you didn't see other country how poor they are, and they need such clothes, such things. Maybe you don't need in Europe. They need in Africa or in Southeast Asia or somewhere poor place. So I don't believe that. And the second that I want to say, because I'm a producer of clothes. I also produce a lot of brand for German brand for like sustainability. They order a lot of fabric from Italy, from Taiwan, from Japan, but of course price is far very expensive. Come to the end garment, and the quantity is very small. And there are many years they are doing this business, and I don't know how. Okay, they pay us fair because they are German company, everything is good, but I don't know how long they can go on like that. And the end consumer who buy clothes from them, so I don't know if they have education system to teach them, because we try our best. We maybe 5 or 6 times more expensive for fabric, for everything, for come to this product. So if the end consumer, if they really take care of this and they educate them to make a recycling on this, I don't know it, because this I also very I want to know what is going on in Europe, how they treat, because such a very huge brand like Zara or C&A, they don't take care about this recycling. But some small brand, they are really take care, and they really put high price on this for purchasing everything. And because I don't know the system in Europe was really is coming up, how to deal with these different companies. So
I think
yeah.
I think a lot of companies. I think Kuben, you saw a lot of the landfill waste is mainly from high street brands.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if it was Chanel, we'll all be diving into that waste, but it's mainly high street brands. Yes, Kirsty?
Yeah, I would say that there is actually a solution for this. So it's not about people seeing where everything is landfilled. It's about centralized sorting. So everything needs to be collected from the households, go to the centralized sorting, sort it away that there's first those that has resale value. That is actually business for those who are sorting. Then there are those that is for the remake value. And they have a certain business for those who are in that business. And then there is a recycling value. And those are business, for example, for us. And I think that that's the only way of doing this. It's nothing, if you just think about this very idealistic way, that is of course one way of doing this. But when there's a business, when there's a centralized collection systems where everything is sorted the way that it can be reused to the maximum, that is of course the best way of doing it. And then you can transfer, for example, those for resale to countries that are less fortunate. So there is solutions.
Oh, there's a gentleman there who wants a question.
Thank you. The system you described we have in Germany, and the problem with this collection is a lot of charity organizations, NGOs, they do the collection for the people, and they found out that that is what left over from all the high street brands is not even able to recycle. The quality is so bad that they only can waste it. No? So a lot of shoes from Germany are sent to Romania where they burn it, or they use it for aluminium factories just to burn it there. So we call it thermal recycling. So they do it with tires as well. And there are a lot of solutions in the market, but you only have to see them. And they are mainly done by small little designers in Berlin, somewhere hidden. Not that hidden, it's on Friedrichstraße. For example, Natascha von Hirschhausen has a wasteless collection. And when you go to the industry, you see that they adopted those kind of concepts, that they have new machines that when they cut the denim for their pants, that they have mainly no leftovers. No? Or even you talked about circularity this morning. The North Face had a collection now that is 100% circular. The problem is that it has the double price for the consumer and it looks the same to the consumer. No? So the brands start their little capsules just to find out if it's possible or not to sell it to the consumer. As Oliver announced yesterday or a couple of days ago, that they have a circular denim collection now where they don't use any rivets and they do all the points With stitching, the problem is that the stitching is not made from cotton; it's made from polyester. So when they want to upcycle the denim, they have polyester in the 100% denim fabric. So those are the little problems we have to work on before we upscale this for the industry. Yeah?
You make a very good point. What do you think, panelists?
That's very interesting.
Kirsty?
Yeah, I understand that there is a lot that needs to be still developed, but isn't that ecosystem is not ready? Like I said earlier, it really is not ready for the big masses to come into those sorting facilities. And at the same time, what needs to happen to these things to work is the innovations needs to be scaling up.
So there's one lorry per minute that ends on a landfill. So the Italian fashion industry with all the Italian brands without shoes are producing 180 billion pieces of clothes each year. So, and this is without what's happening in Asia, what's happening with brands from the UK, without happening with all the Primarks and H&Ms and Zara's, and even H&M is doing his greenwashing. At least they are the polluters. Fast fashion cannot be sustainable. No matter how it's done, it uses a lot of energy, it uses a lot of CO2 when they ship it all over the planet. That is mainly the problem in circularity as well. So you can't make fast fashion affordable for sustainability. Even if it's cheap, it's not. Somebody has to pay the price at the end. Yeah? So.
But what if it changes and it becomes more expensive?
It's about education. So you have to educate your students, the industry, the people itself, and you need to at least influence the influencers. So they go out, and we had that with the digital fashion. They have an unspoken law that says you can only wear something once. Our best influencers are Her Majesty that wears skirts for 10 times, or our former chancellor that had the same evening robe for 10 times when she goes to the concerts. Those are the influencers of the future, and not the ones that say, like, I can only wear this once on Instagram or in TV or whatever. So, and it's cheap, and it is expensive when you have a Balenciaga t-shirt for 150 euros, which is actually crap. Or if you have a Zimmerli t-shirt made in Switzerland out of Sea Island cotton, also for 150 euros. That is quite cheap because it's made in Switzerland, fair trade from the best cotton in the world that grows at least without any chemical treatments. Then cotton is fine. Cotton is basically not the problem. Cotton is the problem when it's made in Uzbekistan or when it's made there where cotton is not naturally grown. That is the problem.
I think your solution is good on paper, but because there's a lot of things moving within the industry, I don't know if you guys agree, it's not so simple to say, okay, let's do this and then everything will be well. There's many things to consider. You think about the designer, you think about the textile, you think about the manufacturers, you think there's so many cogs in this big machine, this monster, that I wish it was that simple that we could just say, let's do this and it's done. Because I feel like if we were able to do that, it would have happened 10 years ago. But there's just not enough conversation. I think, Kirsty, you always talk about we need to collaborate, we need to have a conversation, and everybody needs to kind of come together. You're working on the new cotton project, and you're all kind of coming together to create a more circular type of business model. Would you like to kind of share a little bit about that before we close?
So the New Cotton Project is all about creating an ecosystem around circularity. So it's an EU government-funded program where we are looking into the circularity, starting from the sorters, going to the recycling, going to the yarn manufacturing, fabric manufacturing, then back to the brands. Brands are releasing those to the markets, getting that back from the consumers, recycling it again. And then there is those who are looking for the business models for this, and those who are looking for the LCAs of the whole project. And that is something where we see where are the actual weak spots of this chain. We are trying to identify every single spot that there's weaknesses and try to attack that. And that is only way of doing the circular model by really looking it very deeply, demonstrating it in a scale, and really understanding how the whole circularity works as a business.
Before we close, I don't want to overrun on our time. Let's start with Kuben. What are the key takeaways that you want to share with the audience?
I mean, we're on the same level, him and I. That's exactly where it's never going to change. And when it changes and it's sustainable, it's way too expensive. All the issues, wearing items more frequently, the same item. It shouldn't be all about the social media influence. It should be people that we look up to making the change. I'm sitting with a lot of waste from H&M, Zara, all the fast fashion in the UK, and I'm manually taking that T-shirt, changing it, pushing it out. And it takes a village. And we need more people doing a greater good.
Marianne, any last words?
Yeah, I don't think there's one single solution that will tackle this whole problem. It's many different solutions, and we've gotten ourselves into this situation with many years of ignoring it, many years of ignoring it. So we can't expect this to turn around immediately. But I think you mentioned collaboration. I think collaboration, many different ideas, brands working on their side, consumers pushing for it, legislation pushing for it, all these parts together, eventually I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to tackle this problem. It will take time, it won't happen tomorrow, but I'm optimistic that things will change and that has really shaken up. So I do believe we sometimes get into this doomsday vision, and I do believe there's a glimpse on the horizon as well.
Kirsty?
I think the biggest takeaway from the day is that I hear you. I hear you. And that it's good that there is such an enthusiastic group of people that are willing to change this industry. Because what brands are hearing at the same time is the demand from the consumers. And they are the ones that have a power to change the whole industry. And that's why we have been working with them from the beginning. We decided to start with the brands, because brands can change something in a bigger scale. And to have all your consumers so enthusiastic of making this happen, I think that is the key of the success.
Simon?
Oh, yeah, well, I totally agree. So I think we reached the point of circularity in this conversation itself. So my contribution can maybe put in one word, like simplicity. And what I really hope is that we learn as human beings and being an audience that when we leave this room, we are able to connect or to implement simplicity in our daily routine as well, as much as possible.
So I'm sure hopefully that all of you will take away from Kuben's end, think about your waste and how you also get rid of it. Think about when you're buying a product, about the end of life and what you're going to do. And with Marianne, traceability, how important it is for you to ask those brands about transparency, never be afraid to ask. And if they're hiding something, know that maybe that's not the brand that you should be investing in. And Kirsty, with recyclability, look at your products and think to yourself, can I recycle this? Is this something that can actually have a second, third, fourth, fifth life? And I think with recycling old fabric is something that's really taking off. So there's quite, besides Kirsty, there's quite a few other companies, so make sure you do your research. And Simon, from you, just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Thank
you all for
Thank
being
you so
here.
much.
Thank you very much.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to approach them. Thank you.
Thank you.